If you're new here, hi, my name is Kate. I'm a Canadian knitter, and this is my first time doing one of these Everything I Knit videos. I learned how to knit when I was a kid. My grandmother taught me, but I knit sporadically as a kid, nothing ever more complicated than a hat. And it was only this time last year, so at the very end of 2024, that I got really into knitting, and specifically knitting garments. So what I'm here to show you today is actually every garment that I've ever knit, because that I have only done in 2025. And I will also at the end show you all of the accessories and gifts that I knit this year. Now, I want to start with a quick disclaimer. I know that my channel name is Kate Knits Slowly, and I'm about to show you a ridiculous amount of garments that I knit this year. What I'll say is that I'm at a point in my life where this is my main hobby. I work from home, so I don't have like commuting time or anything. This is what I do on lunch breaks. This is what I do before work while I'm drinking my coffee. So I happen to have a lot of knitting time at this point in my life. The way I would put this is that if you spent like all year toiling over a single garment and you're super proud of the final result, I think that is way cooler than what I am about to show you. So, disclaimer aside. Now, the way that I'm going to format this is mostly chronological. I'm going to start with all of the garments in roughly chronological order. I've reordered it slightly so that I can have all of the summer garments together. But the reason I'm doing this is that I think it's actually a pretty good progression from like beginner to more advanced. So if you are just getting started on your knitting journey, I think this is a pretty good order to follow, with a couple exceptions, and we will talk about them. If there's something that I found very, very difficult for my level of experience, I will tell you. Okay, and I think with that, we should get into it. I have no idea how long this video is going to be. I don't even know if I'm going to finish filming this today. I'd like to do the garments today. I have no idea. This is the first garment that I ever made. This involves a very short story. I said that I was really getting into knitting at the end of last year, like at the end of 2024. At the end of 2024, I was also very lucky to go on a work trip to Sweden. And when I was there, I also took like a weekend to myself, and I went to Oslo as well. I had a great time. I was so lucky to go there at this point in my like knitting journey, when I was getting really excited and like looking up all of these different Scandinavian yarns. Anyway, this was a souvenir yarn that I bought. It is Isager Tweed and Isager's Mohair, both in the color navy, I believe. So this is a very fancy yarn for a first garment. I understand that, but it was a souvenir one. I was really, really excited to get this yarn, and I still love this yarn combination, and this is actually like one of my favorite garments. The pattern is the All Season Vest by Noriko Ishikawa, who is one of my favorite designers. I actually think this is the pattern that I would recommend to a beginner. You might actually end up being kind of spoiled by how much information she puts into her patterns in terms of like detailed schematics and diagrams that show you like where you're picking up, where you're going to start. And the reason that I love this as a first garment is that I don't think it looks particularly like a beginner made it, not particularly hand knit. I don't think that it's down to anything special that I did. I did not have a lot of knowledge going into this, but the pattern itself includes so much detail, like short row shaping in the shoulders, a little bit more shaping to do decreases under the arm. I believe the only modification I made here was that the length is somewhere in between her cropped length and her long length. So this is, for me, perfectly cropped, and it was like somewhere in between cropped and regular. Okay, and now we have to get into this pile. It's gonna be like Jenga. Disclaimer disclaimer, this is not a beginner pattern. Please do not make this as a beginner and then come yell at me. This was my first sweater, however. This was the Pohjola Sweater by This was the Pohjola Sweater by Sari Nordland. And I made this in another souvenir yarn from the same trip. When I was in Oslo, I picked up some Hjelholts Undspinderi yarn, which is very, very rustic. That's kind of the second disclaimer. I'm not particularly sensitive to wool, but I can't really wear this without something underneath, even on the sleeves. So this is a fingering weight. This is, the more I get through this sentence, it's going to sound crazier and crazier. This is a fingering weight colorwork garment with 3 colors in the yoke, which does mean that there are 3 colors worked in the same row at times, and there's purling in the colorwork. It's just it's just nuts to do this as a first sweater. It actually wasn't supposed to be my first sweater. The one that I'm going to show you next was supposed to be my first one, so I did think this through and think I'll do an easy one and then I'll do this one, which I really want to make, but I know that it will be harder. But long story short, I was still missing some yarn for the next one and I really wanted to get started with these garments, so I made this. I actually have pretty good notes on my Ravelry for this one, so I will link to the project, because in addition to this being a very hard pattern, not easy at all, I had some real issues with the fit. This is actually exactly what I like in a round yoke garment. I like it to be oversized and basically like kind of a poncho with the sleeves starting a little lower. I know that's not everyone's taste, but it is mine. So to me, when I looked at the sample pictures to this, the positive ease in the sample kind of looked maybe a little less dramatic than this, but it looked like something I would be comfortable with. So I was in between a couple sizes, so I sized up. I did get gauge, and then I got maybe this far into the yoke, tried it on, and it was like a turtleneck. Like it would not have blocked out. I just knew that I could not do it. So I frogged the whole thing, started over, and I ended up sizing up. I'll double check these numbers, but I think I was in between a size 3 and 4 based on the size chart, and this is a size 6. And then when I looked through Ravelry at the time, I was really like trying to figure out what I had done wrong. It seemed like other people were having this issue too. So bear all of that in mind. That being said, I do really like this finished object. I want to treat this video a little bit like an audit too of my like wardrobe and what I reach for, what I don't. I don't reach for this one a ton. I think the main reason is how rustic the yarn is. That being said, I have zero regrets about making this because I think it's so beautiful. The one like technical thing that I would change is that I had not figured out at this point how to do neat ribbing. So I don't know if you'll be able to see here, but this is like probably the messiest ribbing in my wardrobe, and that bothers me slightly when I look at it. But as a first sweater, incredibly proud of this. Another fun thing about this video is going to be to see how long my hair lasts, putting all of these on and off. If you have like wavy or curly hair, you will understand. Okay, so you might be looking at this and thinking that I'm lying, that the one I just showed you came before this one, but it is true. And I think that that maybe explains in part my feelings towards this one. I do not wear this, and it's really unfortunate. This is another souvenir yarn. This I bought in Sweden, I believe, and it is Sandnes Garn Sunday. And then the mohair that's held with it is actually Knitting for Olive. And I bought that when I got back to Canada because I realized that I couldn't meet gauge with just the coast. This is the Sunday sweater by Petite Knit. And There are a lot of things that I love about it. It's very cozy. I love the yarn. I love the yarn combination. I like the... It's hard to put my finger on why I don't wear this, and I want to be careful with how I say this because this is a comment about my own Sunday sweater. It's not a comment about the pattern itself or about anybody else's Sunday sweaters. To me, this looks like a beginner knitter made it. And I think what that comes down to is partially the yarn choice. The fact that the mohair doesn't actually match the coase very well. I don't love that. It just makes the stitches look really obvious. Even just the big gauge. I think this was on like 6 or 7 millimeter needles. And since then, I have not knit anything at that wide a gauge. I did get gauge for this. My swatch is right here. So I don't know why my stitches look so big and not very good. I also just don't know if this color suits me. It's a lot more saturated than what I usually go for. Anyway, this was a flop. Let's move on. Actually, I will tell you the real reason that this one bothers me. When I picked this up in Sweden, the yarn, I had a very specific project in mind. I wanted to make a Berlin scarf. But by the time I got back to Canada, I was so interested in garment knitting that I wanted to find a garment pattern to go with that yarn, and I settled on this one. And obviously I have regrets. Actually, part of me wants to frog this and make the scarf. Okay, let's move on to something happier. This was my next sweater. This was my first cable sweater, and this is the Braidy loop sweater by Other Loops. I knit this in Sandnes Garn Tynn pure Gynt and Camarose Midnatssol. And I actually love this yarn combination. The Tynn pure Gynt is similar to the regular pure Gynt in that it's not, I wouldn't say it's rustic, but like it has some really good structure to it. But then the Midnatssol, which is an alpaca-based mohair alternative, it gives it some real like drape and softness. It also hasn't pilled like at all. I've definitely never depilled this, and it looks great. And I think that this was actually a great yarn choice for this pattern because you do want something like mohair so that it's nice and drapey, being this oversized. But then you also want something with structure to it for the cables. So this was like a nice in-between. There's a lot that I love about this pattern. I love that the wide ribbing, I love the look that it gives. I love that the decreases on the sleeves are a little bit unique. They happen here on top of the sleeve rather than underneath the arm. It's a sort of saddle shoulder construction, which I really enjoyed. And then the cables go down the back. This is the pattern that I would recommend if you like the style of it, which is a big if, for a beginner cable project, because there just aren't that many cables. And there's a lot of this that's really just ribbing. I will say, not size inclusive, this only has 3 sizes. I believe I went with the middle size. I have one very particular gripe with this pattern. I personally do not mind the sleeves. I know that a lot of people mind that the sleeves start kind of low, like this is where my elbow is and this is where the sleeve starts. I don't mind that at all. I love a big oversized fit. My issue, and I think it maybe has something to do with the yarn choice and also how I block it. I don't know how well you'll be able to tell, but the arm kind of rounds out like this. And I don't know why. And I basically, if I block it like straight on the floor, flat on the floor like this, it really wants to do that, which just, what always goes through my head because of the vertical ribbing and the shoulders doing this for some reason is like football referee. I don't watch football, American football that is, but for some reason that's what goes through my head. Okay, next up, this is another kind of crazy one. This is self-drafted. This was knit in Drops, Alaska, and that's an Aran weight yarn, and I used, I want to say like 17 balls of this, so it is very heavy, and that's basically what I like it for. The design for this was heavily inspired by My Favorite Things knitwear sweater number 10, I believe, but I wanted a different cable pattern, and I specifically wanted these cables kind of framing the V-neck. And then I've also got a cable sort of framing the drop shoulders. So I had these like really specific cables in mind. So I just ended up starting from scratch, designing it myself. And I do really like the final result. The yarn is really nothing to write home about. It's pilling a little bit. It's really just like wool, but it is a good budget option. Next is the Staffin Vest, which is a pattern by the Creabea, Rebecca Clow, and I did this also in Drops, Alaska, just a different color. So this is another good just like budget yarn option, nothing to write home about. It's not particularly drapey, which I think is my only real complaint with it. Like this is quite a structured vest that like doesn't flow, doesn't drape. Modifications I made to this pattern, I believe I sized up quite a bit. I generally do that with Rebecca's patterns because I like these more oversized fits. I also did a twisted rib for all of the cuffs and neckline, etc. The reason for that is that I still hadn't figured out how to make my ribbing look good yet. On that last sweater I had done 2x2 rib, which looked better for me. But for this one, I just decided to go with twisted rib. In a few garments from now, I will figure out how to do some neat ribbing, and I will explain to you then how that worked out for me. But yeah, I love this pattern. I love all of Rebecca's patterns. They're all very size inclusive, and this is one of her mega patterns, which includes a sweater, a cardigan, and the vest. So I could see myself making the cardigan in the future. I would just have to find the right yarn for it. But I'm very happy with this. I love the detailing on the back with the shoulder shaping being part of the pattern. And I love the color of this as well. I feel like I haven't quite figured out how to style it yet. Partly I think with it being kind of boxy because of the yarn. But yeah, I'm a big fan of this. And also the faux baubles were pretty fun and not very hard. So I would say that this is a very good pattern if you are looking for a textured knit, but maybe you're a little bit afraid of cables. This might be my second flop of this video. So this is the sweater number 18 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and it is made in Drops Air. Drops Air is one of those blown yarns, I believe like some kind of polyamide and wool blend. You can tell that I went on a bit of a Drops shopping spree from these past few pieces. I don't think that I will knit with Drops Air again. It is just not wearing well at all. I haven't depilled it for this video, so I don't know if you'll be able to see. Like everyone says, it does pill like crazy, and I feel like when I'm wearing this, I'm just constantly going like this. And it's not even like small pills, it's like all of the yarn is coming off of it. This definitely isn't like a durable garment in any sense. Another budget option for yarn. But yeah, for me and my needs, I don't think I'll be doing it again. I did enjoy the pattern. It was a lot of fun, a very easy knit purl textured pattern. Personally, if I did this again, I think that I would choose like maybe a Knitting for Olive heavy merino or like a Cascade 220 for this. Something with a bit more durability to it, actually a lot more durability. I do wear this, but I grab it more as like the same way you would grab like an old cozy crew neck sweatshirt. Definitely not as like an outfit. This isn't something that I go out with. I'm literally just standing here pulling pills off of it. It's so sad. One nice thing I will say about this yarn is like shockingly warm. Probably one of my warmest garments, and yet my lightest one. So yeah, very good beginner option for the pattern. However, I would say that the Staffin I showed right before this is also slightly more difficult in terms of stitch pattern, but also a decently beginner-friendly pattern that is also really just kind of knits and purls with a few baubles in it. This is the Olives Vest by Pernille Larsen, who is from Knitting for Olive. And I knit this in Sandnes Garn Sunday, held double. Don't ask me why I didn't use double Sunday. I don't remember. I think it was probably because, to me, getting the fingering weight yarn but holding it double means a bit more like flexibility. Like with the leftovers, I could use it as a fingering weight or as a held double again. This is in the colorway Matcha. This is one of the only colorways I remember. And it might again be too saturated a color for me. I don't wear this a ton, and I think that's the main reason why. The second reason might be that it's maybe slightly tight at the armholes and the neck, but I don't think it's too bad. You can see here that I was still doing that modification of doing twisted rib on absolutely everything at this point, because that was in my head the only way to fix my messy ribbing. But yeah, I did love this pattern, and I could see myself making it again in a different yarn. This is a saddle shoulder construction, so you start in the round actually, but then you're doing increases on both sides of the shoulder to get that shaping. And then there's also short rows in the back as you're doing that. And I found that to be like really engaging and fun. So huge fan of this pattern. Pernille Larsen's patterns, I would say like opposite end of the spectrum from Rebecca Close, where these ones do not have a lot of detail. They're more on the concise side, but I would say they still have all the information you need, just like no extras, if that makes sense. This is definitely 100% my most worn garment of the year. This is the Esther Jacket by Petite Knit, and I knit this in Cascade 220 in the color Natural, held with Camarose Midnatssol. So this is the same mohair alternative that I used in my Braidy loop sweater, and it's actually the same colorway too. I have a specific issue with it in this make though, and I don't know how well you'll be able to see, but I find it in this garment to be a little bit hairy, if that makes sense. So like rather than fluffy, some of these alpaca hairs, like that one looks to be like 2 inches long. So I'm always like finding these really long hairs. I don't know if that was maybe just like the specific lot that I got for this. But yeah, I wasn't thrilled with it in this garment, but I didn't have that issue in the Braidy loop one, so I'm not sure. I do find this to be so soft and cozy though. It's very heavy. This is what I reach for just when I need something warm and cozy. Definitely a beginner-friendly one, and it was a really good one for me to do for a first cardigan. I wouldn't have wanted to throw in anything else too complicated into a first cardigan. Now this one is the one where I started to figure out how to make my ribbing look neater. It still wasn't perfect, but definitely a lot better than that first one that I showed you. I believe what I did here is, first of all, it's a tubular bind off. So what that means is that rather than just the Italian sewn bind off, you're also doing this setup rows of double knitting right before it. And that gives it a kind of nice thickness to it. And then I think the other thing I did here was do my purls through the back loop. We are getting into summer garments now, and Maggie has joined us. She just had a bath, so she's wet. So I've never actually talked about this one before on my channel, but I have worn it and I tend to get some questions about it. This is a modified version of the Lumme Tee by Sari Nordland. So it's not the sweater pattern. It's basically a long sleeve t-shirt. So modifications that I made to this were obviously the sleeves to knit them longer. I did include some instructions on my Ravelry page for what I did with the sleeve decreases. To be fair, when I finished this, I was expecting like kind of a full length sleeve, and these are definitely 3/4, but I'm actually okay with that. I really like it for a more summery garment. And I was actually wearing this like well into the fall. I could see myself doing another one of these like long sleeve tees again in the future. What do you think, Maggie? Yeah. Yarn for this is Sandnes Garn Sunday in their slate and putty colors. So like not black and white, but very dark gray and very close to white. And I really like that combination. I actually really like doing the color work with this yarn because the stitch definition just shows up so well. This is also, I would say, a very good beginner pattern. The color work is very simple, no crazy floats or anything. Yeah, I think that as a first color work project, this would be a good one. Rather than the first Sari Nordland one that I showed you, which was not beginner at all. Last modification I did to this, I found that the I-cord bind off on the neck looked a little thick in the pattern pictures, so I did a 2-stitch bind off. So it's still an I-cord bind off, but it's slightly different technique that only uses 2 stitches for it, so it ends up looking thinner. And I will link to that tutorial in the description for you because I did find it useful. Okay, next summer garment. I'm actually showing you this one out of order because I wanted all the summer garments in the same section, but I did this earlier in the year. This is the SABAI top by Suzanne Willer. And the reason I can tell this was earlier in the year is the twisted ribbing. So this was the part of the year where I hadn't figured out combination knitting yet, and every ribbing I was doing was combination. I actually have a picture on my Ravelry of when I tried this with just regular 1x1 ribbing, and I could not get it to look good. So for this one, twisted rib for the collar, and also the hem and the side panel here. Now the yarn for this is Lana Grossa Eco Puno, and only time I've used this yarn, and I do like it. It's incredibly soft, nice next to skin, but it's definitely not a summer yarn. The composition of it is like mostly cotton with some wool and alpaca, and it's the alpaca that just makes it like not quite summery. I think what I would do with this in the future is maybe like a lightweight cardigan would be really nice in this, but not a tank top. And I think that's the main reason that I don't reach for this a ton. The second reason is definitely the color again. I wish that I reached for these more saturated colors, but I think unfortunately I just don't. This is my Tolsta Tank. So this is again in Sandnes Garn Sunday, and I actually made this based on a picture from Pinterest that I will put up, and I think it matches pretty well. I'm pretty happy with the like vibe matching and everything. My one very specific issue with this is my fault. I did a folded hem. This is constructed bottom up, so it was the first thing I did in this pattern, and the hem just flares out. So it was my own modification. I was also knitting off gauge, so it was completely up to me to figure out like the needle sizes and stuff. This is another very good beginner pattern. I think that it would be fun to also do in like a cotton merino. I think that would be really nice. Last summer garment. I'm showing you this one with a shirt on top because this is how I would normally wear it, and it's definitely not bra friendly. Not that that matters, just for me on the internet. So this is the camisole number 5 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, which is a very popular set of summer pattern. I did this in a Sandnes Garn Sunday, which is a fingering weight all wool. And what I've heard is that the all wool for a summer garment actually works really well if it's that thin, and specifically if it's a ribbed garment like this, because it gives it some elasticity. And I think that's definitely been true. I wouldn't wear this on like the hottest days of the summer. For us here, it does get like 35 degrees Celsius on the hottest days. But I would say that on a day of like 20 degrees, this would be fine and I would wear it out. So I do love the fit of this. It's definitely a bit of a labor of love with the fingering weight yarn, all of the ribbing, all of the double knitting for the collar and for the armholes. But the fit is just fantastic. I finished this towards the end of summer, so I actually haven't worn it a ton, but I don't think that that's because of the garment itself. I also had imagined myself like wearing it under cardigans, and I haven't done that. I don't know if it's like the wool on top of wool or just that the 2 hand knit cardigans I have don't really go with this. So this is how I would normally wear it, with like a collared shirt on top. It doesn't look great with the white shirt, but I'm not going to be completely changing outfits. This is in the leftover Cascade 220 in the color Natural from the Esther Jacket. And this time I held it single, and I really prefer that. I feel like if I did that Esther Jacket again, I would do a yarn combination more like this, where it's just maybe a Cascade 220, a knitting for olive heavy merino, something to that effect. And if I had to like change my gauge and like knit a different size, I could do that. If you're curious about that, the first video that I put on this channel was about how to pick your size when you're knitting off gauge. So this pattern is the Bitsalmoon Vest by Sedna Yang. And I am a big fan of this pattern. This is when I started to get really into cable knitting and just wanted to do these intricate cable patterns like this one. And this is another pattern that I found to be like perfectly detailed, like nice schematics and dimensions and all of the information that I could want. So this is again one of my favorite makes of the year. I think that it fits great. And this is definitely where I start to get really happy with my ribbing. I think it looks quite neat. And this is again just with the knitting through the back loop trick, I believe, and definitely tubular bind offs. Okay, this is another favorite of the year. This is my Waffle loop sweater, which is a pattern by Other Loops. This is again done in Cascade 220, held single, this time in the color navy. And I would say that this is another very good beginner cable pattern. It looks, but the sleeves, there are no cables. This is all a knit pearl texture for the waffles. And the only cables are on this front panel here and the back panel. So there's nothing too complex. And the cables themselves, not too difficult or intricate. The previous pattern I showed you, the Bitsalmoon Vest, definitely not a beginner cable pattern. I would recommend to have like a couple cable patterns under your belt before going for that one. But this one is quite straightforward. This pattern, like the other loops pattern, is again only 3 sizes, and they are all meant to have this kind of big boxy oversized look. This also has different sleeve shaping, but again, it's quite unique in that it happens on the top of the sleeve. And I've just been a big fan of this finished make. This I wear all the time. I was actually thinking today, this one, I have 2 issues with the yarn choice for this. And you can see I've been using a lot of Cascade 220 at this, so I do really like the yarn combination, or just the yarn held single. Loved it in the Bitsalmoon Vest. But on this one, it is pilling a ton. And I don't know if that's a difference with the color. I have just depilled it, so I'm hoping that that was maybe like an initial shedding of the yarn, and maybe it's gotten that kind of like top layer off. So I'm kind of hoping that it doesn't keep pilling as much. It's definitely not as bad as like the Drops Air. And to be fair, I wear this a ton. I wear it like out on walks. I'll put jackets over it. So it's not like a huge surprise that it's pilling. But I do think that I'll wait and see how it continues to pill before I plan another make that's just this held single. I also wanted to comment on the ribbing on this one, because this is where I think that I like really figured it out. The previous one, the Bitsalmoon Vest, on that one, I started combination knitting. I won't get into how to do combination knitting in this video, but there are really good videos on YouTube if you're interested. And it involves a lot of purling through the back loop, which is what I had found helped my ribbing. And at this point, I realized it was actually helping all of my knitting look a lot neater. The other thing that I started incorporating around this point was a tip from Sasha at Andolini Knits, who was saying that you can go down an extra needle size for the ribbing. So like, let's say that this pattern was done on 5mm needles. I'm not sure if that's right, but it would say to go down to 4.5mm for the ribbing. What you can do is go down an extra one, go down to 4mm. And then in order to account for that, you add more stitches. So just like make one right, make one left, every maybe like 7 or 8 stitches. And using that smaller needle size helps it look really, really neat. So I've been doing that a lot ever since. I cannot explain why this is the second green stockinette vest that you have seen in this video. I'll try to explain. So this is the Everyday Round Vest by Noriko Ishikawa. So it's basically the round neck version of the very first garment I showed you. And everything I said about that one can be said of this one too. The shaping, the detail, the schematics. This is just a fantastic basic. This is the first garment that I made using hand-dyed yarn. So this was by the Lab Fibers in their DK Superwash base in the color Shaken Not Stirred. So I love this color. I actually love it more than the Matcha color from the other green vest. So that is notable when thinking about my wardrobe. I also like the fit of the cap sleeves on this pattern. The superwash did grow a lot with blocking, as expected with superwash, but I still thought that it was notable because I thought this was going to be like too cropped, but trusted the process and it looks just about right to me. This is how I tend to wear it, as like a sleeveless top with quite a bit of warmth to it. Now, I think that the main reason I ended up with 2 green vests this year is that I did buy this yarn at a fiber festival. And I think that with the in-person shopping, I don't know about anyone else with anxiety, but for me, online shopping like gives me time to really think through my purchases and like evaluate all my options. Whereas when I'm in person and under a bit more stressed, I might forget that I already have a green vest. So I think that's what happened here. That being said, I like this one more. And here we have my last garment of the year. So this is the Lauder Cardigan by Rebecca Clow, the Crayabea, and I knit this in Sandnes Garn Pure Gynt. This was my first time using Pure Gynt. I really like it. I'm wearing it with a tank top right now, and I would say that it's like slightly scratchy, but not itchy. So it's definitely more on the rustic side than a Cascade 220, which you saw that I used a lot in this video. But yeah, I feel like this is going to wear very well. It does not have as much pilling as the Cascade 220 does when held alone. So I'm really looking forward to using this yarn again in the future. To speak to the pattern a little bit, the pattern is not beginner friendly. I would not do this as a first or even a second cabled pattern. I also wouldn't do this as a first cardigan or maybe even a second cardigan, although I guess this was my second cardigan. I also did make some modifications to it. First modification, I was knitting off gauge. Again, I will link to that math video that I have about how to pick your size if you are off gauge. I think generally the gauge for this would have been like Pure Gynt plus a Mohair, but I didn't want to use Mohair and I'm really happy with that decision. This is still like fairly drapey. I probably could have gone up 1 needle size, but I do like this. The other modification I made is the button band, double knit button band, which is not in the pattern, but I will link to a tutorial that I used about like how to pick up the stitches for the button band, and I didn't find that to be too difficult of a modification, and I really love the look of this. I think it looks great. I think last modification I made was to the sleeves. I really didn't want tight sleeves, and so these sleeves I did different decreases, definitely fewer decreases and later decreases, and definitely they are not tight. I like them a lot. One issue I have with the sleeves, I was playing yarn chicken like pretty severely, and they're a little bit short. I do now have more yarn, so my thinking is that I'm going to try reblocking it and seeing if I can just do it a bit more aggressively and stretch them out a bit more, because I don't necessarily want this garment to be heavier, but I would like for the sleeves to be a little bit longer, maybe even the body to be a little bit longer. So I might try reblocking it with like maybe pinning it, but we'll see. I do have yarn to go in and add more to the cuffs. I would probably do, these are about bracelet length right now. I probably want another inch or 2. I do like long sleeves, as you probably saw from, in particular, like the Waffle loop, the Esther Jacket. They all have sleeves that I can go like this quite easily, and that's my preference. Hi, it's the next day. Honestly, we're lucky that Maggie let me film for as long as she did yesterday. But I do think that I've accidentally stumbled into a very good way of doing this video for me, because yesterday I did the try-on for all of these garments, and then I started editing that part of the video as well. So I was able to kind of reflect a bit as I was watching myself in all of these garments, and I'm ready to do some reflecting with you. My top 3 for the year are definitely the Pohjola. I'm so sorry to anyone Finnish watching this. The Pohjola sweater, also the Waffle loop, and finally the Bitsalmoon Vest. I'm going to give an honorable mention here to the Lauder Cardigan because I think that could easily be in the top 3, but I do need to figure out the sleeve length before it really becomes a favorite for me. Now, what all 3 of these have in common in this lineup is really just like level of difficulty. Maybe not quite, because the waffle loop I would say is relatively beginner friendly, like if you've done a few garments and you're ready to start cables. But I think the lesson that I can really draw from this is that I will never regret doing something that's kind of like intricate and impressive, because that way, even if it doesn't become like a wardrobe staple for me, like I mentioned that this yarn is so rustic that I don't wear it a ton, I'm still able to look at it and go, I made that. That's really cool. I'm really proud of it. So I think that's the first lesson, that none of these were like impulsive cast-ons. They all had a lot of thought that went into them. Now let's go with my bottom 3. We're gonna call these my flops of the year, affectionately. I feel like I was a little down on all of these yesterday, and I want to be clear, I don't have any real regrets about my year of knitting. Like, I think that there's a lot that I can learn from what I like and don't like in this pile. But really, this past year of knitting for me, it was my first year knitting garments. So they can't all be winners, they can't all be in the top 3, and it was all a learning experience. So let's discuss what I will affectionately call the flops of the year. My flops of the year are the sweater number 18, the Sunday sweater, and the olives vest. And an honorable mention in the flop category is going to the SABAI top. In my flops, I wanted to pull these out to discuss them with you because I do think there's some learning here. I also think that I can save them. Not this one. We discussed this yesterday. There's 2 distinct categories here. There is, I don't like the yarn, and these 3 are, I love the yarn, I don't like what I did with the yarn. So this one is going to go into my like drawer of sweatshirts. It does not belong in my drawer of hand knits that I'm really proud of. But I will continue to wear it. I think part of my frustration with that is that a big part of knitting for me is to be able to dress myself more sustainably. And when I have a make like that, it doesn't feel sustainable to me. And that's one of the other reasons that I want to slow down with my makes. Now that I have learned all of this, I want to like really take my time and be intentional with things. Which brings us to these 3. These have a lot in common. So these are the 3 that I identified yesterday as saying, I don't reach for them a ton. I think it might be because the colors are a little saturated and I don't know if they suit me. When I was editing this yesterday, I don't think the colors look terrible on me, but that doesn't mean that they like feel like me. Like I feel like myself in it, if that makes sense. So here is what I'm thinking for each of these 3. One of the really nice things about knitting and the sustainability of it is that I now have these materials and I could frog these if I wanted and make something else with them. We talked about this one yesterday. I actually think I downplayed my frustration with this somehow. The full story of this is that I got off a plane from Canada to Sweden, then checked into my hotel, and without sleeping, immediately walked across the city of Gothenburg to buy this yarn for this scarf, then for some reason changed my mind, and I don't even like the finished product. So the more I think about this one, and from editing the video yesterday, this is turning into the scarf, 100%. I need to right my wrongs. Then I was looking at the SABAI top, and you might be a little surprised to see this as one of my flops. It's not a bad garment. Love the pattern. I think it's well done. However, I talked yesterday about how the yarn is not really meant for a tank top, and that alpaca content just like isn't right. It's a little too fuzzy. But I also talked about how nice it is next to skin, and I started to think, what about a scarf? So what I'm imagining for this is maybe the Poet Scarf by Sari Nordland or something similar to that. But I'm pretty set on frogging this because I think that this could be a gorgeous yarn in a different make. And finally, Olive's Vest. So this one, the color's a little saturated. However, I do really like green. I think the main problem is actually the fit of it. It's the fit of it being something that I'm not fully comfortable with, and then the added element of it being a saturated color. So what I'm thinking with this one, this is Sandnes Garn Sunday held double. That means that there are actually 6 balls of Sunday in this vest, which is a lot of really good yarn. It also means that if I were to repurpose it, I would have the option to hold it with a mohair and make like a full garment with this amount of yarn. So I could do like a cardigan, which I think might be nice. There's some options here. I took a quick look at what other people are doing with this yarn. I saw a lot of Maggie cardigans in it, which are very nice. I think a basic like that would be good. But I am taking suggestions for this one. I don't have a specific plan yet. So what would you do with this yarn if you had 6 balls of Sunday and the option to add some mohair to it and have like a DK weight in this color? Okay, accessories. I didn't do a ton of accessories for myself this year, and that is another thing that I'd like to change for next year. I was just so into the garment knitting. Now, this is what I have been wearing every cold day of the year. It's been about like -20 Celsius here, so I'll give you the full effect of what I wear under my coat when I go outside. So these are really the 2 winter accessories in my wardrobe this year. This is an Oslo hat by Petite Knit. This is actually the same yarn as the all-season vest that I showed you in this video. And this was the leftovers. So I'm a really big fan of this. The Isager mohair is not scratchy to me, so I'm able to put it on my forehead just fine, which is nice. And if you live somewhere cold, with the Oslo hat, I would recommend doing kind of a denser gauge like this, which is a sport with a lace weight, rather than a fingering with a lace weight. The reason for that is that you end up with 3 layers of thickness here over your ears, but there's only 1 layer of fabric for the rest of the hat. So it is nice on really cold days or windy days if there's some thickness there, and that's why I like a kind of dense one. But yeah, I don't have a ton to say about that. It's just been a fantastic wardrobe staple, and I would love to do more of these with any other leftover yarn that I end up with. And then this is my Barbara shawl, which is a pattern by Gregoria Fibers. This is one of those triangular shapes where you can quite easily just knit until you've done half of your yarn quantity and then start decreasing. So that's exactly what I did. I had, I believe, 4 balls of Sandnes Garn Sunday again, and I held it double for this. This, I would actually say, at least for me, was kind of deceptively difficult. Not quite as beginner friendly as it looks. But this is really soft and squishy, and again, a pretty dense fabric because of the Sunday held double. So I've really been enjoying this. I could see myself making another one of these. So yeah, those are the accessories in my winter wardrobe this year. We'll just put them on the stack. And now I'm going to do a rapid fire of gift knits and socks. The reason these are rapid fire is that I do not have them to show you. I've also done recent videos about all of these, so if I mention any of these in passing and you want more detail, I will link to those videos down below. So this year's gift knits. Gift knits this year, I made the Kitten Catch Mittens by Florence Miller. That I did in West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply, which is a yarn that I also used for socks this year, and I'm a big fan of it. I actually already have more of it that I'm planning to use soon. It has some Blueface Leicester content in it. The other mittens I made this year were the Pingo mittens, which is a pattern by Sasky & Co. For that, I kind of used like a mix of leftover yarns, fingering plus a DK. Fingering plus a lace to make a DK. And those are a fantastic pattern for leftovers because you can do mismatched colors, so it ends up using the same quantity. If you are looking to do a first pair of mittens, I think the Kitten Catch mittens would actually be fine. They have a fantastic fit to them. I was actually a little sad to give them away because they fit so nicely. The thumb is really nicely shaped, and Florence includes a lot of detail in her patterns, so if those look like nice mittens to you, don't be too afraid of the difficulty. If you've already done a color work project or two, I don't think that it's too outlandish to pick that one up. So those were my mittens of the year. I also did another Oslo hat for my brother, nothing too exciting there. I also did 2 baby blankets this year. For my niece, I made the Mini Augustins number 5, and for my nephew, I did the Leafy Baby blanket, and for both of those, I used Barocco Vintage, both fantastic patterns. If you are looking to do a baby pattern, the Leafy Baby blanket is free, so it's a great pick. The Mini Augustins one, though, I found that it was a lot more fun to make, just like very engaging, not as hard as it looks. So if you've done a lace pattern before, I don't think that the Mini Augustins number 5 would be too difficult, and that would probably be my recommendation. And my final baby recommendation is the Baby Bear Balaclava by Pernille Larsen. I made 2 of these this year, one for my niece, one for my nephew. They don't use much yarn. I believe the pattern just says to get 1 ball of merino and 1 ball of soft silk mohair. But honestly, I was able to use, I want to say 1 ball of each for like both of the balaclavas that I made. So doesn't use a ton of yarn. I think it would be great for leftovers if you have a ball of mohair that you haven't used all of it. And I think this is a great pattern for kids in colder climates. One modification that I make is to not include the mohair on the neck, just in case the kid is sensitive to mohair. And then the pattern does instruct to not use the mohair on the part that goes around the face. That's also a very quick knit, and I would say very beginner friendly. I think it might have been my first time doing short rows when I made one in 2024 and didn't find it too difficult. And final gift knit of the year will bring us also into the socks category because I made some DRK everyday socks for my dad for Christmas. Those were in the largest size in Songbird Fibers, their sock base in the Boreal Chickadee colorway. They were a big hit as a gift, and yeah, I can't really speak to the fit of them because they weren't for me, but they seem to fit well. And I can see myself making that pattern again in the future for myself. It was just nice and easy, toe up construction, 2x2 ribbing, and it was a Flegel heel construction, which was a little bit new for me and quite a bit easier than a heel flap and gusset, just a little less fiddly. So I will be interested in making one of those for myself to see what the difference is. So now let's get into the socks I made for myself. I am not showing you these because I wear my socks, so they are no longer looking pretty. First socks that I made for myself were the Petal Drop socks by Florence Miller. Those I did in Sandnes Garn Sisu. Then I did the Yukidoke or Yukidoki socks by Yuka. I did those in a Pro Lana sock yarn. And then I did a lot of socks during Socktober. I did the Una socks in Filcolana Arwetta. I did the Mountain Walk socks, again by Florence Miller, in a Lang Yavol yarn. I also did another yucca pattern, Berries and Bird Tracks, in a West Yorkshire Spinners signature 4-ply in the color Cornflower. So real quick on the socks, if you are looking to do a first sock pattern, Petal Drop Socks by Florence Miller. I've mentioned Florence a few times in this video. Her Petal Drop socks do have a full tutorial with them, so it's a fantastic first sock pattern. She also has full videos on showing off her sock collection and then also just like general information about socks. I will link to all of those videos because I found that to be like a perfect set of resources to get into sock knitting. In terms of sock yarn, Sandnes Garn Sisu, lovely. It's a little bit thicker, and that's why I have been reaching for it as like a big cozy sock to wear in boots in the winter. Seems to wear really well. I have been wearing it a lot, but keep in mind when using it that it is a little bit thicker, meaning that your gauge may vary from other sock yarns. And then my other sock yarn recommendation, West Yorkshire Spinners signature 4-ply. I love it so much. I've already made mittens with it, socks with it, and I have more colors so that I can do more variations on those accessories, and I'm really excited about it. So I would go with the Sisu for something more like soft and cozy, and then the West Yorkshire Spinners for something more rustic. Okay, I think that's everything that I have for you today. This was a marathon of a video. If you could see the mess that I have around me at this point. But thank you so much for being here this year. When I started all of this at the beginning of the year, I never could have imagined starting this channel and having conversations with all of you guys about knitting. I've enjoyed it so much, and I do have big plans for 2026. So I will see you then.